since I've been here. I think we decided December? Been 9 or 10 months, something like that. And I did order some pizza, so I'm looking forward to that, because they have great food here as well. So, glad to be with you once again. It's really crunch time, ladies and gentlemen. As you probably know, I appreciate all the hard work that so many of you have been putting in. I know so many of you have been doing what you can, making phone calls, knocking on doors, entering data, doing all sorts of things to be helpful to the campaign, and that's what we're going to need to continue to do. For those of you who haven't heard as much from me, well, first off, I'm Jim Mowrer again. I'm running for Congress here in the 3rd District. And my entire career has been in service to Iowa, in service to my country in one capacity or another. I grew up on a family farm here in central Iowa, but when I was 7 years old, my father was killed in a farming accident. And we lost the farm and moved into town where my mother worked for a modest income to take care of my sister and I. But the only thing that really kept my family from falling so far down that we couldn't get back up was the basic social safety net, and in particular, Social Security survivor benefits. And that's what formed my worldview from a very young age, and my understanding of public policy and how important it was to people's everyday real lives. And it's why I'm a Democrat, and it's why I believe, as I'm sure everyone in this room believes, that we are all better off when one of us falls down. We help one another get back up and keep moving forward. So after high school, I married my high school sweetheart, Chelsea. We have 2 wonderful sons together, Carter and Jack. If you've seen some TV ads or you see this, there are these 2 nice-looking boys right here. They get their looks from their mother. And after the September 11th attacks, I knew I wanted to serve my country, so I joined the Iowa Army National Guard, was eventually deployed to Iraq with the Iowa Army National Guard. It was the longest deployed unit of the Iraq War, 23 months, start to finish. And as trying as that experience was, it's also what gives me such great confidence about the future of our country, because I served side by side with other young Iowans and other young Americans who were willing to sacrifice everything for the future of this country. And some of them did. But it's why I'm so determined to ensure that our best days lie ahead of us, not behind us. When the greatest generation came home from war, they invested in our future. All of them had been part of that effort. All of them had been part of something bigger than themselves. And so when they got back from war, they invested in our roads and our bridges and our schools. They invested in research. They invested in the big things, like putting a man on the moon. And that's what built this America. That's why America is the greatest nation on earth, because of that. But it seems as if we've lost track of that. And now the argument is whether we continue to invest and move forward, or those who believe we should stop and believe our only path forward is to actually go backwards. That's the clear choice that exists in this election. So when I got back from Iraq, I went to work on veterans issues and veterans policy. I was Joe Biden's veterans director for a period of time. I returned to Iraq and did intelligence work as a civilian and advised the commander of U.S. forces in Iraq. I returned to the United States and served 3.5 years in the Obama administration at the Pentagon. I had a couple different roles there. I was the Army's lead representative of the Council of Governors. So I worked with the 54 state and territory governors on Army National Guard issues. I also oversaw the Army Office of Business Transformation. And what the Army Office of Business Transformation was tasked with doing was finding efficiencies in the Army's business operations after decades of warfare. We had spent a lot of money. We had invested in a lot of things very quickly during the 2 wars following 9/11. And they were all well intended to make sure we got the things to our troops in a timely manner. And so some of the cost-conscious things kind of went out the window. So what I did was work with the defense industry, worked with the Congress, worked with the House and Senate Armed Services Committees, with the Democrats and Republicans on those committees. And I worked with the politics inside the Pentagon, which are about as complex as politics outside the Pentagon. And without cutting any services, saved about $3.5 billion in taxpayer money through the reforms that we put into place. And that's why I believe in good public policy. I believe that we can govern better, more efficiently and effectively, because I've seen it work. And right now, we have a Congress and a representative who has failed at those tasks. David Young, our current congressman, essentially lied to the voters in 2014. He said he was a nice, moderate guy. He'd spent a few decades in Washington. He knew how it worked, and he'd be able to get the job done. He'd be moderate. He'd be pragmatic. Well, from day one, that's been proven to be false. From day one. He told the press, he told the voters in 2014, for example, that he didn't think repealing the Affordable Care Act was the right approach. He didn't think that's what we needed to do. Yet he's voted 7 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act. He's voted to defund Planned Parenthood. He's voted against equal pay for equal work. He was actually even one of only 64 members of Congress and the only member of the Iowa delegation to vote against the highway bill, the bipartisan highway bill that invests in our roads and bridges. Iowa has the 3rd most efficient roads and bridges in the country, and we have a representative who voted against the highway. So there is a very clear choice in this election from top to bottom. Now we know what the Republicans are offering at the top, and that is the disastrous agenda of Donald Trump and everything that he stands for and has said. And David Young supports Donald Trump for president. The Trump-Young agenda would be disastrous for our future. I was with President Clinton earlier today in Indianola, and he was repeating a joke that someone had told him about you don't hand the keys to a guy who's going to drive the truck off a cliff. Ladies and gentlemen, David Young is the one who's handing Donald Trump the keys to drive the truck off the cliff. This is an important year. Those of you who've been observing elections for a while have seen some important elections over the years. And you've probably heard people say this is the most important of our election of our lifetime a few times over the years. But when you look at this election and what's at stake, from the top of the ballot on down, for the future of our community, for the future of our state, and for the future of our country, this is the most important election of our lifetime. I truly believe that when I say it. It's not hyperbole this time. It's real. There's a huge amount at stake. So I ask that in these last 27 days, you join me. You join other candidates, great candidates like Mowrer. There's an incredible amount at stake here in Iowa. Our state senate, our state house. We have to do everything we can because we do not want to wake up on the morning of November the 9th and see the headline, Donald Trump elected president. David Young elected along with him to help enact the Trump-Young agenda. It will be disastrous for our future. That is not the country that I want to hand over to my children. We can do better. We should do better. Let's get it done. Let's win. Do everything you can. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate it. So with that, I would open it up for a few questions here and until my pizza gets here. Tom.
I was going to ask you to speak more about what your constructive alternative is, if I could put it in those terms. What 2 or 3 things are the most important to you to get accomplished that you think you can facilitate in some way?
Yep.
In Congress, aside from stopping the
Absolutely
craziness? What are you trying to get done?
We've set a low bar there. We're just trying to stop the craziness and keep the government open.
Yeah.
So, you know, look, we don't know what the outcome of the election is going to be for a lot of different offices. We don't know which party will control what. We don't know who the president's going to be.
Right.
I think that there's some very important things that we can very realistically do and get done. Number 1 is passing a minimum wage increase. If you work 40 hours a week in this country, you should not live in poverty. We've got to raise the minimum wage. Now, the secret is if the Republicans in Washington would actually bring a minimum wage increase bill to a vote on the floor of the House, it would pass. That's why they don't bring it to a vote, because they know that it would pass. So that is one of the easiest things that we can do that will provide an immediate pay raise for millions of Americans and families that'll have a major impact. That's the first thing that we can do, is to raise the minimum wage. Beyond that, I think investing in infrastructure, I've heard from Republicans and business leaders that they are interested in investing in infrastructure. And so I believe that we could, in a very bipartisan way, pass an infrastructure investment bill. Investing in energy infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, education infrastructure. I think we can absolutely do that. I think that we could pass comprehensive immigration reform. We previously passed a comprehensive immigration reform bill through the United States Senate with 64 votes. 64 votes. That's pretty tough to get on a big issue like that. The Senate passed comprehensive immigration reform. The House of Representatives didn't even bring it up for a vote. So I think those are three, I could add on a few more, but those are the top three things that I think we can realistically get done in short order, regardless of exactly what the outcome of the election is.
Good, thanks.
Yeah.
So on the minimum wage,
Yeah.
I think that should be solved for one by indexing too.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's enough to raise it. I think if we are going to have a minimum wage, you have to be indexed by inflation.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to have a discussion every 2-3 years.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And that's
So
exactly what we need to strive for and try to do.
Yeah.
I very much like your emphasis on investment, because I think we've starved this country for a number of decades on investment. And I'd add to your list investing in our young people.
Mm-hmm.
And things I think you could get done, regardless of exactly how things turn out, is some kind of relief on student loans.
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
we have burdened our young folks to the point where it really hurts the economy. Tough to buy a car, can't buy a house, can't invest in their own lives because they're busy paying 7, 8, 9% interest on their student loans. I think more and more, we have millennials moving through that process. They're paying student loans till they're 40. So they're going to be a huge amount of our population and our economy burdened with that, overhang of debt.
Student loans, I think some people just kind of view as a niche issue that only affects a small portion of folks. And that's absolutely false. And it's not a short-term issue either. It's not, well, young people have to deal with this in their 20s and then it's done. This is something that can plague folks for decades, and it stops the momentum of the arc of their career and their lives. Student loans. And so I think there's, it's a twofold approach. Number one is helping and providing relief for people who already have massive student debt. And, the biggest thing is, ensuring that they can restructure and refinance those, just like you can for a mortgage. And right now, that's just not the case. You might have 3 or 4 different student loans from different services with various levels of interest rates, and you should be able to consolidate that into one loan at a low fixed rate. That seems pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Also ensuring that you're only paying 10% of your take-home pay, that it's capped at that as well, so you're not going bankrupt trying to pay your student loans. Then from there, obviously, we want to avoid having these same issues for young people as they move through their post-secondary education. And you look at, I think, all of the options. First off, I'd say there are programs that are out there, but David Young did vote to cut Pell Grants. He also co-sponsored a bill that would make cuts to the post-9/11 GI Bill. And so I think, frankly, right now we have a representative who's not doing anything to make college more affordable. He's actually doing things that will make it less But I think, we should have a public service option. I was in the military, I had the GI Bill for college, and that's wonderful. But military service isn't for everybody. And I think that there are other opportunities, there should be other opportunities for public service, either in exchange for loan forgiveness for past loans, or future credit for education, et cetera. So there are a lot of things that we need to be doing on this front, and most of them, in my mind, are pretty straightforward. And investing in education has always been proven in our nation's history to be a good investment, because it's an investment in our future, making people more effective, more innovative throughout their lifetime.
Great. The Affordable Care Act, the premium is going every year, increasing at a geometrical rate. So it's kind of unaffordable anymore. So hypothetically, if we have a Democrat president in White House and Congress is still controlling by the Republican, how are we gonna fix it while they're trying to repeal that affordable rate?
Well, first off, the Affordable Care Act took a lot of important steps forward. It included coverage for people with a pre-existing condition. It made being a woman no longer a pre-existing condition that you could be discriminated against for. For me personally, my youngest son suffers from a rare neurodegenerative disease. There's only about 400 kids in the United States who have it. And there is no treatment and there is no cure for it. And so it's never going to be a good investment for an insurance company to insure. It's just not going to be a good investment. But it's so important that those people do have access to coverage and access to quality health care. And we are seeing a big increase in the number of people who have insurance. We now have the most Americans ever in our history who have health insurance. Over 90% of Americans are covered by health insurance. So that's really, really important. And so the wrong approach is what David Young and Donald Trump have presented, which is just repealing the Affordable Care Act, which would be disastrous. Throw people off of their health insurance plans. Allow discrimination to go back into place. That's the wrong approach. So we need to fix and do these other things, and I'm open to fixes. When you look at the relicensing requirements, you look at the Cadillac tax, you look at all these other things, I'm open to making this better and addressing the problems that we're seeing during implementation. But unfortunately, we don't have honest governing partners to do that. What their approach is, every time we say, hey, this thing's not working so well, let's fix it, they say, well, let's just vote to repeal it again. That's not the right approach. And so in a bipartisan way, we need to look at what fixes are available and we need to make it work.
But I think Young is saying that because when they look at the polls, there's more people in Iowa that are against the Obamacare poll, which I think is communication fraud. I'm not exactly sure why is that, but and that's the reason I think they're saying that. Give them votes. So what can we do again?
Well, I think just talking about what the facts are. Talking about what the facts are, which is that, again, we have a record number of people who have coverage, and that we can and we should do better as we move forward. But it's gonna take an effort. It's gonna take good governance to do that, and working in a bipartisan way.
Under health insurance, we have a local company here in Iowa who's the for-profit insurance company writing health insurance. They turned it into a nonprofit. The director gets $3 million a year. That's one company. We have another company that, we spend $100,000 a year maintaining our building. And they got tax abatement of $10 million for 20 years. What the hell is wrong with these rules?
Yeah, well, and again, these are all things that, you know, we can identify these issues and say, we need to fix this, we need to improve it, we need to make it better. And unfortunately, you know, again, what we're hearing from David Young, time and time again, is he just simply wants to vote to repeal it.
No, that's a bad deal. But we've gotta find a way to make it affordable for the companies so they don't have to rip off their clients and rip off society in general. And I don't know how you do it, and I don't know whether you can do it.
Well,
I don't mean you,
Sure.
I mean society.
I think when you look at, you know, some of the issues that we faced during implementation have been because we've seen, you know, governors in some states, we've seen, you know, some members of Congress who are intentionally trying to derail it. You know, when you have people who are trying to make it fail just for the sake of political points to say, oh, it doesn't work. It's very, very difficult to implement that. And those are the type of political games that we need to get past. Is get back to normal governing, where everything isn't about politically one-upping someone. It's about creating and implementing good public policy. And that's never gonna be the headline that gets you on, you know, national news, is saying, well, you know, I found this area of government that could be improved, and we fixed it, we made it a little better. You know, we have too many so-called leaders who just wanna run out to the nearest TV camera and make an inflammatory statement, you know? And so that's the type of thing that we need to reject, and it all starts with, you know, Donald Trump and all of his reckless comments and his reckless policies, degrading, hateful, divisive things, and the people like David Young who have embraced that and accepted that as the leader of their party. We've got to reject that in this election and then move forward and go.
But I didn't know somebody else. Go ahead and take it. Then
What
come
about
back.
climate change? I think that's a big issue that we need to do.
Real quick, I think we've got time for that one and then one more real quick.
Okay. So, climate change is real. Human activity contributes significantly to it. And that, unfortunately, is a tough first step that we're having a lot of trouble having people to accept. And who is, you know, when you look at the science, you look at national security leaders, part of our national security strategy that the Pentagon produces is addressing climate change and all of the side effects of it. Rising sea levels, water insecurity, food insecurity, all the second and third order effects of what climate change will cause. So we have to be realistic about it, and we have to be proactive about it. Now here in Iowa, we have the most to gain by being proactive, and we have the most to lose because of our agricultural economy and all the projected impacts that climate change will have on them.
It is happening.
That's right, and it is happening. And we have been proactive. And you look at the investments that we've made in clean, renewable energy. The fact that I was on the leading edge with wind production, et cetera. You know, and these create good American jobs. And energy security is an economic issue and it's a national security issue. And so these are the exact, you know, when we talk about investing in infrastructure, there's no reason that we should not be going towards that vision of completely clean and renewable energy. And that's gonna be great for our economy. It's gonna be good for our national security. And the United States should lead on this issue. That's where I stand.
I would add two things, if I could. You mentioned the relationship to national security. It so happens that Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson is on a speaking tour in the Des Moines area. He'll be at Drake University on Friday at 6:30, I think it is, I can't remember the time. I'll post it on our Facebook page. It's an event that's open to the public. This guy is amazing to hear. He's a colonel, he was Colin Powell's chief of staff. He's very he knows what's going on in the Pentagon and.
It's at the church, isn't it?
Oh, First Christian Church.
At 7 o'clock.
Good, at First Christian Church, which is right at Drake. It's University at 25th. So.
He will also be at Golden K Kiwanis tomorrow morning at 8:45. That meeting would be open to the public, if anyone would want to come. That is at Westminster Presbyterian Church at the corner of Beaver and Allison.
What time, Virginia?
8:45 tomorrow morning.
I don't suppose I'll post that one. That'll
You're
be-
welcome. You're welcome to come, cost $1 for a cup of coffee and a donut.
The other thing I'd add is that in relationship to Iowa and the other problems we face, cover crops take carbon out of the air and put it into the ground. That's a big improvement. So if we can get that as a widely adopted feature, we get also better water quality as well as contribute to, I mean, that agriculture is a big opportunity worldwide to improve the climate change formulas. It's something we need to do.
My question is more about security. I watched Channel 11 last night, along with, I hear my daughter too. We haven't talked, but at any rate, ISIS and the future really bothers me for our children, our grandchildren and all. You've had experience in that area. My concern is listening to the predictions for the future that indicate that if Africa gets involved along with ISIS, that this could create a real Pandora's box for us. I don't know if that's a good word, but at any rate, we have problems to come, and Iowa is critical, and because of what you're talking about, Tom, with our crops and everything else, if we go bombing people. And I think the fact that we have Korea, the North Koreans with unpredictability, our water shortage already, and some of the other items that we have that are future war problems for us. And I'm real concerned that it's so critical that Donald Trump not get elected. He just frightens me to no end with his relationships of, with Russia and other countries. They're not positive like we've tried to have, or not negotiating. They're just, so I just am curious about your comments on,
Absolutely.
on the security issues.
We have a complex set of issues that we face when it comes to national security and foreign policy. And I think we need to be strong and tough on these issues, but we need to be smart as well. And we need to use all of the tools that we have available to us. One thing that I would add is we actually have a record low percentage of veterans serving in Congress right now than at any other point in the nation's history. We have never had a smaller percentage of veterans serving in Congress than we have right now. And I think that, when we have veterans in Congress, they bring a certain perspective and background that would be valuable as we move forward into this complex world. I think when it comes to Africa, specifically, there's a lot of different things we could talk about in this issue. But when you look at these issues, and how do we avoid these future problems? How do we avoid new pockets of extremism from popping up in certain places, especially Africa? The State Department's budget to invest in these areas has been at risk for a long time. And Bob Gates, one of the previous secretaries of defense, President Obama's first secretary of defense, who he kept, that President Bush had appointed Secretary Gates, I believe in 2006, maybe 2007. Secretary Gates went over to Congress and defended and asked for the Congress to fund the State Department's efforts. Now, you don't usually see that, where the Secretary of Defense goes to Congress and asks them to provide these resources to the Department of State. But what Secretary Gates knew and advocated for was this is how we avoid future conflict. It's about investment. It's investing in the long term, recognizing what's going to be an issue further down the road and avoiding it.
Right.
It's what we all do in our personal lives when we can. When we can invest in the future, one way or another, we do that. You know, if your roof's leaking, instead of waiting for the whole thing to collapse, you get it fixed. And right now, we've had a lot of trouble investing in those things. And again, it's about having the right leaders in the White House and in the Congress who recognize these things and recognize the priority that they need. All right, well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate it.